Welcome, everyone. We're just going to give it a few minutes to let everyone shuffle in from the waiting room. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Legal Value Network webinar. I'm Alexander Eula, Program Manager for LVN. A special thank you to our sponsor, Latera, for making today's webinar possible. Before we get started, I would like to go through a few housekeeping notes. Today's session will be recorded and will be using Zoom webinar. Therefore, attendees will be muted and cameras off. We encourage you to use the Q&A feature to ask the presenters questions throughout the webinar and use the chat box feature to interact with other attendees. The opinions expressed during today's webinar are solely the panelists and do not express the views or opinions of their respective employers. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's session, Director, International Product Sales for Latera, Freddie Hustler.
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. Is it easy for me to share my screen from yours now? Yeah, great. I will share my screen and we'll get going on today's webinar. So I should have that shared now. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. We're very excited to have everyone on this webinar today. We have a great panel of speakers with us to really talk about thinking outside the time card. So what we'll do is go around the table, virtual table, and introduce ourselves. So we have Jessica Davies, Michael Golek, and Yelita Rukaitiet. So Jessica, would you like to introduce yourself and who you are, where you work, and what your role is at MacArthur English?
Yep, absolutely. So my name is Jessica Davis. I'm Director of Matter Performance and Service Innovation here at MacArthur and English. Our department is relatively young. We started right at the beginning of the pandemic, and within our function includes LPM. And we really use time cards a lot. We kind of view them as a key to getting a lot of information that otherwise would be completely unavailable or we'd have to run down individually. And kind of one of the things that we always try to achieve is like, we're kind of like thieves in the night. You know, we go in, we're going to make your life easier. We're going to make things better. And if we've done our job right, you wouldn't even have noticed that we were there. And that is kind of one of our selling points, because obviously practicing attorneys have a lot of other things on their plate. They don't want to have to worry about things like this. And really robust time entry narratives help us do that.
Brilliant, thank you. And Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mike Goulet. I'm the Director of Pricing and Legal Project Management at Brown Rudnick. I'm fairly new to the firm, going on about 2 months now. I'm the first Director of Pricing. We're starting pricing and LPM here at the firm with the hopes of, refining and innovating the firm's pricing, its offerings, and how we communicate with our clients. I spent 12 years at Wilmer Hale, growing pricing there, starting out as an analyst and working my way up to director. And similar to Jessica, I like to say that regarding time cards, the devil is in the details. You can't really, price, come up with comparables or budget for a matter just by looking at the top level numbers. You have to get into the weeds to figure out what happened, when, and why. So, the lifeblood of a pricing team is the time entry.
Brilliant. And then Yelita, how about yourself?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Yelita Rukaitiet. Well done, Freddie, for trying to pronounce my Lithuanian family name. 10 points for that. I am based in the Netherlands, and I'm responsible for product management at Clocktimizer. I joined Clocktimizer 3 years ago. And in my role as a product manager, I basically try to get customer input and market knowledge to help develop applications, appropriate applications and features and functionalities to help solve various problems that law firms face. Since I don't have legal background, of course, working with our customers like Jessica and Mike is very valuable to me. And I'm looking forward to see what additional learnings we'll learn all together. Timecard, from my perspective, as a vendor, as a product manager, is really the core of Clocktimizer. It's a base for everything that we do. And I'm sure we'll get to the details of that during this chat today.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you all. And then finally, myself, I'm Freddie Hustler. So I'm the Director of International Product Sales for Latera. So my role, I lead the sales team that are responsible for firm intelligence products at Latera and also the workflow products. In this instance, we are talking about Clocktimizer today. Clocktimizer is a product that sits within our firm intelligence product segment. And within that segment, we also have products such as foundation software and concept. So with these three products in the firm intelligence umbrella, we really look at the data of a firm that is around the business of law. So in particular with Clocktimizer, we're looking at time card entry and the value that time cards have within a firm. So today, we really want to be going into a bit more detail around what is Clocktimizer. Well, Clocktimizer is an algorithm that is connected to time cards narratives. So we want to talk a little bit about that, but then we want to understand the actual value of narrative data and how that might be important to you. So there's going to be a bit of collaboration in today's webinar, both from the panel, but also yourselves as delegates, so that we can really understand, what is it our panelists are doing today with time card data, how is it providing insight and value, but then looking in further to the couple of use cases. So in particular, looking at how, the devil in the detail that Jessica likes to talk to, and how that communication can be clearer with your clients around invoicing, around understanding what is it that you're entering into your time cards and providing transparency to your clients. Then there's the view on how the data can also help with practice management. How can you look at some time card data and understand what is it that's happening within your practice, and how can you actually make material change or drive efficiency changes within your practice through actually analyzing the data. We want to make sure that that is not seen as a daunting or scary exercise. We want to ensure that everyone can see real use cases from both Jessica and Mike's experiences. Then there comes the actual how are firms looking at this as real ROI. So what are the activities that are happening and how are we seeing the ROI? Then we'll wrap it up at the end with a few key takeaways to then move and close out the session. So what we'll do is I'll hand over to you, Lisa, now, and she'll be able to go into actually what is Clocktimizer, what is the background as product manager of Clocktimizer, what is it doing and what value is it bringing?
Great, and this time card illustration illustrated perfectly well what is the core of Clocktimizer. So Clocktimizer has a natural language processing algorithm. The need for that was actually born back in 2014 when one of our co-founders, Peter van der Hoeven, he worked as a M&A lawyer at DLA Piper, and he noticed the problem firsthand. There was a lot of inaccurate time cards, inaccurate coding, making it very difficult for operational teams to understand who was doing what, where, at what cost, and when was the work done. So Peter teamed up with our former CTO, Bram, and they started gathering data, looking through tons of data and narratives and understanding what work was done and what keywords need to be picked up by the algorithm to then assign automatically activities. So what in this example, as you see where Eric worked on several emails from all parties regarding closing transfer deed and SBA. So Clocktimizer runs through millions of time narratives almost in a blink of an eye. I think we had some customers actually counting. It was 36 seconds to run through a huge file of narratives, which of course manually would take a long time to do. And the natural language processing algorithm assigns these activities. We're also able to identify typos, unless of course they are too creative, and abbreviations, which I heard recently are very popular at law firms. So this is more from, of course, product side, what the algorithm is and how it works. And of course, there are a lot of features that I could end up talking for hours, but I would love to pass it on, of course, to Jessica and Mike as well too. Would love to hear from you as well, what the algorithm and what the time, or even before looking at the algorithm, what does Timecard data mean to you and what value does it bring? And I think in the next slide, Jessica, maybe you can share some points around this. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so this is actually a slide that's directly out of our time entry compliance training that we do for sometimes it's new employees or client teams. And it's something that I think a lot of people want to not really pay a lot of attention to. It seems like an afterthought, but it really is very important. You have the slide in front of you, so I'm not going to read through it, but I think the main takeaways are a lot of people are depending on your time entry data, not just a name, not just a task, an activity code, but the actual narratives. Everything that we do as a law firm in terms of our KPIs are driven by our time and our time entry information. And it's not just law firms, also clients. They're very focused on making sure that they're managing their budgets, and a part of that budget is often outside of counsel legal spend. And so it's critical for them as well. We also just generally at our firm, our position is contemporaneous and accurate timekeeping is an ethical obligation. We have an obligation to have reasonable and appropriate fees. And so in order to make sure that we're doing that, we expect our timekeepers to consider this as a core and fundamental part of being a good and ethical lawyer. And then last but not least, it's how you tell the story of what you're actually doing. So, we often make a lot of promises when we're pitching or bringing in work. And this is where we put, where you put your money where your mouth is and you say, this is what you're paying for. And often the audience for your invoices are much broader than your individual work product. And so it's really important to think of it in that way.
Brilliant, thanks, Jessica. And Mike, before we go into the poll, do you have anything you wanted to add around the importance of narratives and time entry within your role? And then we'll go to a poll and ask how the audience see that and open up the dialogue.
Yeah, I think what I would add is I would generally second everything Jessica said, but in particular, specify that time cards touch multiple areas of the firm. It's not just a task you have to do to get the bill out the door. In fact, it's if you're waiting till last week of the month to enter your time, you're missing a lot of key aspects that the time entries help with. It's a communications tool to the client, obviously, but it's also an internal communications tool because it allows for that monitoring of budget versus actual, especially on those fast-moving matters where the client wants and requires daily updates, for instance. In addition, it allows for, and this is something we'll get into a little bit more detail later in the presentation, but it allows for practice management, for instance, who's working on what? Are people busy? Are we pitching a new potential case? Do we have the staffing for it? And it allows for measuring of profitability by reviewing again, who's working on what, are the right people working on the right tasks.
Brilliant, thank you. And we'll go into the poll now. So hopefully you'll see a poll question come up and ask you, do you use Timecard Insights today? So whilst we give you a minute to complete that, I think I've got a couple of thoughts or questions perhaps for the panel. around this, so we're obviously, the algorithm Yolita is pulling from the narrative. And I guess when we're looking at that, the key to the narrative is the detail within, right? The keywords that we're putting in. What would you say is the biggest value in reading the narrative in your world versus perhaps what more traditional time card systems are using around placing task codes?
Well, I think it's level of granularity. So phase and task codes and activity codes are at a really high level. And one of the things that we try to do is identify opportunities for improvement, identify ways that we can do things better, more efficiently, or what have you. And it's hard to do that without looking at the narratives. And often the narratives answer the question why as well. So if I'm looking at an invoice and I see that it took someone 3 hours to do something that I thought should have been 5 minutes, looking at the time card narratives can give me some indicator. Maybe it was a particularly large document. Maybe it was a contentious conversation. These are all things that are not captured by the categories that we typically have.
Okay, interesting. And we got the results. Whilst you gave that answer, the results came up. So I'll move over, and we have these results. Do you use time card insights? And we've got a bit of a split. We have 61% of the audience yes, and 39% no. So that's really interesting. So we have a fairly good split. I guess it's now about, well, how are we, or how are you, Jessica and Mike, using them? And let's go into a couple of use cases where you're seeing value from them. So I'll bring up this slide around the invoicing being a form of the client communication. What is it about narratives and the detail of narratives and the categorization of what Clocktimizer is giving you that is enabling you to drive more value and communicate more clearly to your clients?
Yeah, well, like I said, we make a lot of promises when we're bringing on engagements, and really it's our opportunity to show that we are following through and we are taking ownership of those things that we assured that we would do for the client. And to Mike's point, making sure that the right people are doing the right things at the right time with the appropriate client engagement and approval. The thing that I think is super important is things like the Clocktimizer algorithm, or just even manual human review. It's a garbage in, garbage out type thing. So it's important that a time entry narrative says who did what, when, why, and some of that can be picked up by work date and stuff like that. But a lot of it, particularly the why and the specific what, really needs to be in the narrative. I think sometimes we just need to ask ourselves, would we send this in an email to a client? If you wouldn't send that in an email to a client, it's not the way that you should write your time entry narrative. And we've been able to, be brought into engagements where maybe things weren't going the way that we had hoped, whether it be a budget issue or a fixed fee arrangement. And you're able to look at the time entry narratives, use Clocktimizer to kind of hone in on areas to target for a little further review, and then make changes. Ask the right questions, things like that.
Okay.
I might add to that.
Mike, yourself.
Yeah, I might add to that it's also a sort of a safety for the firm as well. It's a trigger for the communications that should be happening before the invoice. If the client is learning something that you've done by reading the invoice, then it's almost already too late. What I mean by that is, many pitches, obviously, we all know that the clients are asking for fixed fees up front, or for an estimate that they say is just an estimate, but once they see the number, they hold you to it. So reviewing the narratives, reviewing the time cards internally in the firm allows you to identify where out of scope work happened. That way you can start the conversation, 3-4 weeks before the invoice even goes out the door. the idea that the client reading the invoice is the first communication, that's typically where you will not be able to increase your fee. If you're talking with the client, being open with them, if they said to you, we anticipate no more than 5 depositions, and you can identify 8 or 10 or however many in the invoice already in the narratives, then you call the client and say, this is going out of scope. We need to discuss adjustments.
Interesting.
Yeah,
so you almost see that going from the reactive world of, here is what we've done, to a proactive.
Pricing is completely, pricing is and has the capability and should be a proactive force for the firm.
We've actually sent along a Clocktimizer report as part of that conversation. And eventually, we were able to expand the fee agreement. It was a fixed rate thing, and we were able to get more on top of it because of that report and the conversations.
And did you find that because, as Mike says, being able to identify it 2-3 weeks prior was enabling you to kind of set the scene and say, we are approaching out of scope work here. This is why, and this is where with the detail, to then engage and say, how would you, how do we proceed?
Absolutely. Yeah. We were able to flag early on, and then the report allowed us to provide the level of detail that our in-house counsel needed in order to escalate it up her chain for additional approval.
I think one funny comment you could make also is obviously many clients, and I'm sure Jessica, you can attest to this, clients will hammer the firms on, stop having so many meetings. You're wasting my fees by talking all the time. So we're reviewing the narratives, and we see there's a bi-weekly or bi-monthly team meeting, right? Once every 2 weeks, the team gets together. But in looking at the narratives, the client is calling 3 different partners an hour a day, or several hours a week, and we can go back to them and say, look, we're spending so much on communications because you're calling us. So they don't want to pay for it, but we have the validity to say, well, it's driven by you.
Yep,
Brilliant.
absolutely.
And then Elisa, do you have anything to add around the categorization of Timecard data and how Clocktimizer provides that?
Yes, and I think, Jessica, you shared a great example, which I believe we cover in the next slide, where how Clocktimizer uses how we aggregate some of these data outputs to help law firms have more targeted approach. So one thing is, of course, to have the Timecard data. Hopefully it's as clean as possible. We analyze it quickly, but then how do we make it possible for firms to surface up the right areas to look at first? So one way we do that is when we run through the narratives, when the algorithm does that, we identify keywords that are either very definitive, for example, share purchase agreement, due diligence on closing. I don't know, you, Michael and Jessica, you would give more practical examples in this case, but we have keywords that actually are definitive and clear. In that case, we assign a green color to that time card and we say we identified a clear keyword. In some cases, we have very vague narratives where say I'm calling John or dealing with a few emails, replying to drafts about something, but we don't really know what it is, just a little bit of a hint. In those cases, we mark the narratives or the categorization as vague, orange, and the red one is uncategorizable. Even if you have technology, even if you have the right processes behind the technology and the right supporting teams, if you have a narrative where you say various activities, there is little that a technology or a team can do. And then to your point, Jessica and Mike, if we are able to spot, okay, where do we have the most of green or red areas? Which clients are they under? That's basically the link to help solve that problem. And maybe you can add as well, Jessica and Mike, on the topic.
Well, this is one of my favorite things in Clocktimizer. so I'll speak up. I am not reading time entries every single day. Like, I don't know who has the time to do that. So having the narrative quality, I don't know what black magic they use in the background to get this, but it's super helpful. And for different clients, I may have a certain threshold where I'm like, okay, it's fine as long as we don't have any red, or I may say it needs to be 100% green because of this particular client or the use that we have in mind for the time cards. But it allows me to see who's struggling with their time entry and address them specifically without waiting until the end of the month and like getting an invoice or a pro forma and then having to figure it out from there.
Right, and maybe just a little deeper dive on the strategies you choose to go around that. So in this example, we have where you can zoom in on granular names, but then of course the question is, will these people be receptive? Do we want to go that route? You could have a higher level overview per practice by timekeeper level, perhaps. How do you decide which approach will you take to help improve this going forward?
What I would say is it really starts just like layers of an onion, starting firm level and drilling down to the different components. And you mentioned, Yolita, practice level, looking at department practice, billing partner, et cetera. But it also does get down to that individual timekeeper. And what that says is another aspect of pricing that sometimes we don't necessarily put enough emphasis on because we have so many other things to do, but pricing really is a training ground as well for the attorneys. This is direct bottom line impact that if you're looking at these red uncategorizable, if the system can't read them, there's a pretty good chance that the client doesn't want to pay for them. And even the orange, and honestly, some of the green as well, but it's really the case that you can train the attorneys on proper narrative writing, on being specific, on not using abbreviations. Simple things, low-hanging fruit, creates less write-offs or prevents write-offs.
Right. Most of us have OCGs where they explicitly say that the narratives must not be vague. They must be descriptive. So this gives us a really easy way to monitor that.
And do you use the Jessica internally more than externally? So I'm guessing you use this in a method to change behavior around narratives, provide visual insight and dashboarding to enable a fee earner to understand what good looks like. Does it set those precedents internally?
Yeah, so this would be something I would definitely only use internally. I haven't shared this externally before because I think that in their e-billing systems, they tend to have other sophisticated ways of analyzing our time cards. And I do find that it's, very helpful for training behavior in identifying early on making edits, because I don't know if anyone's had to coordinate an effort of revising a month's worth or sometimes more of time entries. It's a lot easier to nip it in the bud than it is to go back and do revisions.
Do you see a threshold? So in this example, we have Eliza Angel, whose uncategorizable percentage is rather higher than Mike Ross, for example. Do you use that to go in and allow them to make changes in smaller data sets to then improve it back into green?
Yeah, it's like for me, I don't think we should ever have anything that's uncategorizable, regardless of how we're using it. Like we should not have red. Whether we have some yellow really depends on, like, if it's a fixed fee arrangement where we're not actually sending the invoices out to the client, then having some yellow may make sense as long as we internally can understand what was happening and we can make sure that we're doing things as efficiently and maximizing profitability as much as we can. But yeah, absolutely. I would definitely talk to Eliza first.
One other thing I would bring up, Freddie, and this is a credit to Latera and Clocktimizer, but Clocktimizer obviously is very open to communications and discussing the algorithm. While these might be uncategorizable or vague, it goes both ways. It might be something that is truly uncategorizable, but it also might be something the algorithm's not picking up. And that's a clear opportunity to talk with Yolita, to talk with Clocktimizer, to help get the algorithm adjusted. That's one of the key benefits that I've experienced is the algorithm keeps getting better because of this client input. So there might be something that is new, a new terminology, new way of phrasing something, and we can get the algorithm updated.
Definitely, we appreciate that collaboration as well from Clocktimizer and Lidera perspective as well. And maybe worth highlighting as well that the learnings we make from all of our customers are improving the same algorithm. So there are some customizations, of course, we can allow per customer, but also everybody can equally benefit from ever developing and growing algorithm. So the collaboration, of course, is critical for us as well.
That's great. And I guess this has covered off really nicely the ability to look at narrative quality and the importance of that and application use. If we move forward and we start, if I can move forward, there we go. I guess this data transitions nicely into not just the narrative quality, but also the bit that Mike, you mentioned earlier around practice management. How does the categorization and detail of the data help you around practice management? I guess this slide is talking to what junior associates are doing on a weekly, monthly basis. How is that working for you at Brown Rudnick and Wilmer Hill?
Well, a couple of different ways. One, at a high level, it allows us to see systemically who's busy, who's not, who has availability. So it allows us to know, from a staffing standpoint, are we overstaffed? Are we understaffed? Where can we fit or move more people? It allows for cross-selling. Many clients, we have cross-selling opportunities in different practices, well as that practice able to take on the work. It also helps from a practice management standpoint with pitches and RFPs. Obviously, we also have the benefit of, say, foundation and knowledge management to show who has experience in things. This visualization here allows you to see at either the title or specific timekeeper level, well, who really has done some share purchase agreements in the past couple of years? Who's had experience on, name something, motion to dismiss, motions in limine. So it really helps us to refine who are our go-to people for different tasks, for different work. I've seen plenty of occasions, especially at Wilmer, where a very unique piece of work has come up, and you need to do a quick identification of who, if anyone, has worked on that. So what's the usual course of action? You call up various partners in the practice. Hey, did you ever do this? Do you know anyone that's done it? You look through various databases, or you can come here and search on terms, phrases, types of work.
Yeah, I would also say that this type of breakdown in the fee comparison module is really helpful, because you can take a look at, maybe there's an activity that looks like it's out of whack when you look at like the amount of time you would expect to be on that activity, and there's actually a little bar at the side that shows you who was doing that, and you can usually figure it out by rate. And maybe it's the fact that someone who was not level appropriate was engaging in that activity, and we know that we need to have some controls in place, and like you said, it's an opportunity for coaching and development.
Great point. Yeah.
So that may echo this, well, that may go deeper into this slide here, where you have junior associates running closing activity, where 14% in this example is around closing, but maybe a junior associate should not be doing any closing, and we can drill down, understand, and take action with the practice manager, and generally improve that. Kind of the narrative around that. And then I guess moving forward, we go into, Mike, a bit more detail around the who is available, and this slide kind of gives us that context for you. Is there anything else you would like to add, either Mike or even Jessica and Yulita, around this slide, around availability of staffing?
I think generally it's really just a great visualization here of what the junior associate team has been working on. If you were to layer on top of this activities, it again would show you the flow of work on what someone, or what a group or a title has been working on. So the visualization itself is just a good representation of the firm working over time.
So I did not have Clocktimizer when I did practice management in the past, but one thing that I think this would have really helped with is sometimes people look busy and you don't know exactly why they're busy, but then that can clear up. So for example, if it's a litigation group, people may be really busy because they're currently in trial. That trial will end, and then there may be a petering off, and we want to make sure that obviously after everybody catches their breath, we get those people back working and they're staffed up so they can hit their bonuses and all of those other goals and that they have. But sometimes if you just see the numbers, you think, oh, they're good, they're fine.
Maybe I can add as well from where I sit as a product manager, try to identify what problems we should help solve law firms. And this year especially, we've been hearing quite a bit of not knowing who is available and who should be staffed on the right project. This is definitely a challenge for many. So although with Clocktimizer, and also now we teamed up with Foundation as well, have multiple integrations, we are coming close to that, at least indicating who those people are and how busy they have been historically. So of course, if any of you in the audience as well have any ideas or feedback for us, how to improve this, or if you think this is a perfect solution for you for that piece, would love to hear your thoughts to help us continue, of course, developing solutions that help with the staffing piece.
Yeah, thanks, Yulita. And I guess before we move on, is there anything else, Mike and Jessica, you would add to this component of the webinar, which is around practice management and drilling into the data? Is there anything else you'd want to kind of add or segue into?
From a practice management standpoint, maybe not specific practice management, who, timekeepers and who's working on what, but also just general practice analysis. Again, we're not just looking necessarily at individual matters, which certainly is a powerful capability here, but it's also drilling up. We can look at the clients, specific clients, we can look at the practices, and performance of practices is very important and a very capable tool to use for that. So I would not forget that aspect of Clocktimizer.
Well, and kind of, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Jessica.
Well, I was just going to piggyback on that by saying we're able to pull in industry information as well out of our accounting system. So you could take a look at the industries, what you're doing in those industries, and then look for the clients that you may have in that industry who you're not doing those like big things, right? And that's an opportunity to expand, cross-sell, to Mike's point.
And I was going to say that in the next slide, we illustrate that kind of overview of higher level per practice area. So it's interesting, of course, you could look at data, whether you want to see the areas where the problems are and where you need to focus on first. Like in this case, we can talk a little bit more about write-offs, for example. Or like you mentioned, Jessica, it's an interesting angle as well. Like maybe we feel we're doing well, but where can we expand our business? So interesting two approaches. What are we going to do with our data to win more or to just save more from the current situation?
And I guess that segues really nicely into our final point on the agenda, which was really around the ROI of let's call it ROI of analyzing the time card, because I think when we look at this, we look at a few areas around improving your write-offs. We look at it around how you can be smarter with resourcing. We also then, as you say, Yulita, how do you stand a greater chance of winning a pitch through greater accuracy in pricing or scoping? There's real ROI there, and I guess Jessica and Mike, how does that relate in real terms to within a firm? How do you guys see that and report it?
Well, so yeah, I can definitely say that looking at write-offs is a good one. This example, I think, hits the nail on the head for that. It can actually be to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars each month for even just one client or one matter. If you take the opportunity to look at the time entry narratives and adjust and address those issues proactively. And then, obviously the opportunities where you're able to flag issues that may come up that are out of scope. Now we're talking about millions of dollars in one interaction even. So, we are very client aligned and client focused. So we're often measuring this from the client perspective or the matter perspective, but I can imagine that it would be similar for practice management.
Yeah,
Mike, how about yourself?
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I mean, it's again proactive, giving us the proactive capability to nip something in the bud. Just going back to, are we working on the right, are the right people staffing the right tasks? It has that. Other than bringing in more revenue, it also has the capability to drive you towards bringing in more profitable revenue. If you have the right timekeepers allocated, the fees might be lower than if you had partners doing everything, but you have more profitable dollars. So in the long run, it allows you to be a more profitable firm. So in general, I just think that using the tool to analyze all aspects of the time card has so many different impacts. It's going to impact an individual matter, allow you to price pitches better, but it's also going to allow you to bring in more profitable dollars on existing matters, on analyzing your practice group to get the appropriate staffing. Do we need to bring in more people? Can we cross-sell, like Jessica mentioned? So there's so many different areas that the individual time card touches that, again, in my mind, my opinion, the time card really drives pricing.
Right. I think the time card, like a lot of the other metrics and KPIs, can help you identify the problems or something that's going well. And then the individual time card narratives are like the levers that you're like pulling in order to make something more profitable or come up with a strategy to do that.
And this Yulita, this write-off data is all coming from the source system. It's coming from the time and bidding system, correct? So this is real firm data that Clocktimizer is analyzing and providing reporting on. Is that
right? Exactly. Yeah. So we pull data from financial systems, updated nightly, every night, and then fully import during the weekend. So the idea is that firms having this data at their fingertips, using tools like Clocktimizer, they would have nearly live data and a quick way to surface up the data. So it's, I think, like Jessica and Mike mentioned before, in multiple conversations we had, it's not that data is secret. You can access it in other systems. The speed to analyzing that and summarizing where do we have the most write-offs, and then of course drilling into granular details from there. That's basically what we do.
So this graphic, to just articulate this a little bit more, we've got the total write-offs within the firm of 392,000, with 33.2% of that sitting under litigation, right? So we drill into that, and it takes us into the right-hand pie chart, which is telling us the total write-offs in litigation, and then which office that is, is attributing to the most write-offs. So again, in this example, we can go, Hong Kong is the highest rate of write-off within litigation within the firm globally. We can get there within seconds or minutes versus any kind of analysis, which is really interesting. then I guess for me to kind of start the wrap up on this, given the time, but looking at how we go back to the practice management and looking at their allocation of time and who is doing what activity, it allows you to understand who is, whose work or whose practice is perhaps most responsible for the highest write-offs. We can start strategizing why. You look at the quality of narratives, so you can look at the input and make sure the behavioral change within the firm is improved, and therefore the output of the ROI aspect in what we have here is then driven forward. It really is resonating with me in particular. Everything we've spoken about all connects together and accumulates into, ultimately greater accuracy, more granular detail, and being able to pitch better, being able to analyze better and quicker.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the time cards actually provide you, again, that story aspect of it, because you may see a lot of write-offs concentrated on a particular person or a particular office, but then when you dig in, maybe it's not something that's wrong with that person, that timekeeper. Maybe they are getting lots of requests for revisions from multiple people, or maybe even the client. And that's something that the higher level data is not going to give you. But the time card narrative information, now we have an action plan for how we can address that moving forward.
So it creates context around each individual piece. Exactly. And therefore actually, where perhaps in the past where you're not necessarily driving into narratives and the detail, you're looking at that and causing judgment, or creating judgment on an individual based on historical trends that of archaic nature. Whereas actually now we can drill down and say, no, that's quite right. We can tweak it here and strategize, but it gives us that action. And then the final slide we had was kind of jumping on that as well, where I guess it's a graphic to try to look to visualize what write-off over time looks like. So just to articulate this and then perhaps open it up to you all to discuss. But in this graph, we're looking at over a 2-year period from January 18 to January 20. What was the accumulative write-off percentage year on year? So, for example, 2018, it was at 34. The firm looked to implement Clocktimizer in Jan 2019. That then gave them greater transparency and granularity to then look at actually write-offs went down to 4,000 in the first year of using it. I think that's a ROI measure that we look at here at Clocktimizer to say, implementing everything we talked about, everything Jessica might have opened up on. This is a material visual of actually stabilizing the write-off amount within a firm. Is that thing true, both Mike and Jessica, to you in practice today?
So I would probably look at this a little bit differently, because I'd want to see the percentage of the total billing that this number reflects, but this is absolutely how I would analyze it, definitely comparing the write-off in 1 year versus another year. And sometimes we don't even wait that long. Sometimes we're looking at it week to week in terms of, what we think will be written off and the impacts of whatever changes that we've made, because, to Mike's point, we want to get in there as soon as possible. Time is our widget, and we don't want to waste any of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I agree. I might look at this at a percentage level, but at absolute value dollar level, I mean, it's certainly telling. So yeah, this is definitely one area that we would review to look at what kind of impact we're having.
And Mike, I think in your case, it's particularly interesting to hear maybe a little bit more about how you negotiated, or what role Clocktimizer plays in setting up pricing and legal project management department from the get-go, because I'm sure you had a discussion, yeah, like what returns can the technology bring. So right, apart from write-offs, what other areas do you feel like you see most
Well,
returns?
looking at the tool as a whole and all the areas we can analyze, I mean, one of the best comments I could make regarding the tool is that it's a sort of a force multiplier. I'm coming in, starting a team. The firm knows that in order for this to be successful, we need to be able to spend money. We need tools and people, but it saves on FTE costs. We don't need to go in and hire people, hire a whole team of 3, 4, 5 analysts and a manager. That will come in time, but the tool gives us the ability to act as a pricing team. I have support, obviously, but the tool really is the team in essence.
That's of course
and
a
I can attest.
Huge compliment.
Yeah, and I can attest because I've been doing this pre these tools, that there are definitely reports that I used to spend a full day making in Excel that I can now get in like 5 minutes out of Clocktimizer.
You have to stay really far, running the product, and that's really our goal, to save more time and to give you the tools to focus on areas for improvement, build these strategies and focus time on that versus analyzing lines and lines of data in Excel. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, that's been a fantastic conversation. And I guess now we'll progress into the second poll before we wrap up, which hopefully will appear on your screens any minute. There we go. Which is, where do you see Timecard insights adding the most value? Is it staffing? Is it client invoices to reduce write-downs and write-offs? Is it practice management process, pricing and budgeting, or qualifying ROI? So we'll give it a few seconds, and then we'll have a quick discussion and wrap the webinar up.
I feel like this is a Sophie's choice.
Yeah. This is where we realize we can select all. No.
And of course, we understand that some of these overlap, so staffing for pricing and practice management, but it would be interesting to see the general preference.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest takeaway from this is just understanding the value that the Clocktimizer data provides versus just the platform itself. The analysis that both Jessica and Mike are both running within the firm, purely from what the algorithm is outputting, is really quite interesting, and how that all connects together to tell a greater story than perhaps just very individual point solutions on, whether it might be pricing comparison or budgeting, or there is a lot we can be doing with that data. And I think from a Yolita perspective, it's how can we do that more, and where does the future take it? Right, the poll is closed. Here we go.
Oh, well,
Pricing and
winner.
budgeting. By a
Pricing and
long
budgeting,
shot.
we're at a 93%.
Interesting. So I find that interesting because a lot of what we do is staffing and client invoices. So
Interesting.
It certainly makes sense to me that the tool has great budgeting capabilities. I think I would add to everyone, to the attendees, don't ignore the other ideas of staffing and practice management, because those are bottom line impacting concepts that the tool is useful for.
absolutely. And I think, I was in a similar position where I started a department from scratch, and at those stages, being able to draw a direct line to bottom line is critical. And that's one of the reasons why, we focused on the areas that we did.
Yep.
Yeah, well, thank you both. It's been really interesting talking to you both, and Yolita as well. I guess the next step is for us to wrap this up and get on with our days. But I really appreciate the time you spent, before this and also on the webinar. It's been really insightful, and thank you, and we look forward to what the next webinar may entail for us. But any questions, please, to the audience, please get in touch with ourselves and connect with us on LinkedIn, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
I
it was
learned something
great.
new every time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Very much, everyone, and the audience as well. Have a lovely evening, afternoon, probably for some, or still morning. Thank you all.
Take care.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.